Jiu-Roku-Zakura by Lafcadio Hearn. In Wakigori, a district of the province of Iyo, there is a very ancient and famous cherry tree, called Jiu-Roku-Zakura, or the cherry tree of the 16th day, because it blooms every year upon the 16th day of the first month, by the old lunar calendar, and only upon that day. Thus the time of its flowering is the period of great cold, though the natural habit of a cherry tree is to wait for the spring season before venturing to blossom. But the Jiu-Roku-Zakura blossoms with a life that is not, or, at least, that was not originally, its own. There is the ghost of a man in that tree. He was a samurai of Iyo, and the tree grew in his garden, and it used to flower at the usual time, that is to say, about the end of March or the beginning of April. He had played under that tree when he was a child, and his parents and grandparents and ancestors had hung to its blossoming branches, season after season for more than 100 years, bright strips of colored paper inscribed with poems of praise. He himself became very old, outliving all his children, and there was nothing in the world left for him to live except that tree. And lo! In the summer of a certain year, the tree withered and died. Exceedingly the old man sorrowed for his tree. Then kind neighbors found for him a young and beautiful cherry tree, and planted it in his garden, hoping thus to comfort him. And he thanked them, and pretended to be glad. But really his heart was full of pain, for he had loved the old tree so well that nothing could have consoled him for the loss of it. At last there came to him a happy thought. He remembered a way by which the perishing tree might be saved. It was the 16th day of the first month. Along he went into his garden, and bowed down before the withered tree, and spoke to it, saying, "Now deign, I beseech you, once more to bloom, because I am going to die in your stead." For it is believed that one can really give away one's life to another person, or to a creature or even to a tree, by the favor of the gods, and thus to transfer one's life is expressed by the term Migawari ni Tatsu, to act as a substitute. Then under the tree he spread a white cloth, and divers coverings, and sat down upon the coverings, and performed harakiri after the fashion of a samurai. And the ghost of him went into the tree, and made it blossom in that same hour. And every year it still blooms on the 16th day of the first month, in the season of snow. The Dream of Akinosuke by Lafcadio Hearn. In the district called Toiki of Yamato Province, there used to live a goshi named Miyata Akinosuke. Here I must tell you that in Japanese feudal times there was a privileged class of soldier farmers, freeholders, corresponding to the class of yeomen in England, and these were called goshi. In Akinosuke's garden there was a great and ancient cedar tree, under which he was wont to rest on sultry days. One very warm afternoon he was sitting under this tree with two of his friends, fellow goshi, chatting and drinking wine, when he felt all of a sudden very drowsy, so drowsy that he begged his friends to excuse him for taking a nap in their presence. Then he lay down at the foot of the tree, and dreamed this dream. He thought that as he was lying there in his garden, he saw a procession, like the train of some great daimyo descending a hill nearby, and that he got up to look at it. A very grand procession it proved to be, more imposing than anything of the kind which he had ever seen before, and it was advancing toward his dwelling. He observed in the van of it a number of young men richly apparelled, who were drawing a great lacquered palace carriage, or gosho guruma, hung with bright blue silk. When the procession arrived within a short distance of the house it halted, and a richly dressed man, evidently a person of rank, advanced from it, approached Akinosuke, bowed to him profoundly, and then said, "Honored sir, you see before you a Kurai, vassal, of the Kokuo of Tokuyo. My master, the king, commands me to greet you in his august name, and to place myself wholly at your disposal. He also bids me inform you that he augustly desires your presence at the palace. Be therefore pleased immediately to enter this honorable carriage, which he has sent for your conveyance." Upon hearing these words Akinosuke wanted to make some fitting reply, but he was too much astonished and embarrassed for speech, and in the same moment his will seemed to melt away from him, so that he could only do as the Kurai bade him. He entered the carriage, the Kurai took a place beside him, and made a signal. The drawers, seizing the silken ropes, turned the great vehicle southward, and the journey began. In a very short time, to Akinosuke's amazement, the carriage stopped in front of a huge two-storied gateway ramen of a Chinese style, which he had never before seen. Here the Kurai dismounted, saying, "I go to announce the honorable arrival," and he disappeared. After some little waiting, Akinosuke saw two noble-looking men, wearing robes of purple silk and high caps of the form indicating lofty rank, come from the gateway. These, after having respectfully saluted him, helped him to descend from the carriage, and led him through the great gate and across a vast garden, to the entrance of a palace whose front appeared to extend, west and east, to a distance of miles. Akinosuke was then shown into a reception room of wonderful size and splendor. His guides conducted him to the place of honor, and respectfully seated themselves apart, while serving maids, in costume of ceremony, brought refreshments. When Akinosuke had partaken of the refreshments, the two purple-robed attendants bowed low before him and addressed him in the following words, each speaking alternately, according to the etiquette of courts. It is now our honorable duty to inform you as to the reason of your having been summoned hither. Our master, the king, augustly desires that you become his son-in-law. And it is his wish and command that you shall wed this very day the august princess, his maiden daughter. We shall soon conduct you to the presence chamber, where his augustness even now is waiting to receive you. But it will be necessary that we first invest you with the appropriate garments of ceremony. Having thus spoken, the attendants rose together, and proceeded to an alcove containing a great chest of gold lacquer. They opened the chest, and took from it various rows and girdles of rich material, and a kamuri, or regal headdress. With these they attired Akinosuke as befitted a princely bridegroom, and he was then conducted to the presence room, where he saw the Kokuo of Tokuyo seated upon the daiza, wearing a high black cap of state, and robed in robes of yellow silk. Before the daiza, to left and right, a multitude of dignitaries sat in rank, motionless and splendid as images in a temple, and Akinosuke, advancing into their midst, saluted the king with the triple prostration of usage. The king greeted him with gracious words, and then said, "You have already been informed as to the reason of your having been summoned to our presence. We have decided that you shall become the adopted husband of our only daughter, and the wedding ceremony shall now be performed." As the king finished speaking, a sound of joyful music was heard, and a long train of beautiful court ladies advanced from behind a curtain to conduct Akinosuke to the room in which his bride awaited him. The room was immense, but it could scarcely contain the multitude of guests assembled to witness the wedding ceremony. All bowed down before Akinosuke as he took his place, facing the king's daughter, on the kneeling cushion prepared for him. As a maiden of heaven the bride appeared to be, and her robes were beautiful as a summer sky. And the marriage was performed amid great rejoicing. Afterwards the pair were conducted to a suite of apartments that had been prepared for them in another portion of the palace, and there they received the congratulations of many noble persons, and wedding gifts beyond counting. Some days later Akinosuke was again summoned to the throne room. On this occasion he was received even more graciously than before, and the king said to him, "In the southwestern part of our dominion there is an island called Reishu. We have now appointed you governor of that island. You will find the people loyal and docile, but their laws have not yet been brought into proper accord with the laws of Tokuyo, and their customs have not been properly regulated. We entrust you with the duty of improving their social condition as far as may be possible, and we desire that you shall rule them with kindness and wisdom. All preparations necessary for your journey to Reishu have already been made." So Akinosuke and his bride departed from the palace of Tokuyo, accompanied to the shore by a great escort of nobles and officials, and they embarked upon a ship of state provided by the king. And with favoring winds they safely sailed to Reishu, and found the good people of that island assembled upon the beach to welcome them. Akinosuke entered at once upon his new duties, and they did not prove to be hard. During the first 3 years of his governorship he was occupied chiefly with the framing and the enactment of laws, but he had wise counselors to help him, and he never found the work unpleasant. When it was all finished, he had no active duties to perform, beyond attending the rites and ceremonies ordained by ancient custom. The country was so healthy and so fertile that sickness and want were unknown, and the people were so good that no laws were ever broken. And Akinosuke dwelt and ruled in Reishu for 20 years more, making in all 23 years of sojourn, during which no shadow of sorrow traversed his life. But in the 24th year of his governorship, a great misfortune came upon him, for his wife, who had borne him 7 children, 5 boys and 2 girls, fell sick and died. She was buried, with high pomp, on the summit of a beautiful hill in the district of Hanryoko, and a monument, exceedingly splendid, was placed upon her grave. But Akinosuke felt such grief at her death that he no longer cared to live. Now when the legal period of mourning was over, there came to Reishu, from the Tokuyo palace, a shisha, or royal messenger. The shisha delivered to Akinosuke a message of condolence, and then said to him, "These are the words which our august master, the king of Tokuyo, commands that I repeat to you. We will now send you back to your own people and country. As for the 7 children, they are the grandsons and granddaughters of the king, and shall be fitly cared for. Do not, therefore, allow your mind to be troubled concerning them." On receiving this mandate, Akinosuke submissively prepared for his departure. When all his affairs had been settled, and the ceremony of bidding farewell to his counselors and trusted officials had been concluded, he was escorted with much honor to the port. There he embarked upon the ship sent for him, and the ship sailed out into the blue sea, under the blue sky, and the shape of the island of Reishu itself turned blue, and then turned gray, and then vanished forever. And Akinosuke suddenly awoke, under the cedar tree in his own garden. For a moment he was stupefied and dazed. But he perceived his two friends still seated near him, drinking and chatting merrily. He stared at them in a bewildered way, and cried aloud. "How strange! Akinosuke must have been dreaming," one of them exclaimed, with a laugh. "What did you see, Akinosuke, that was strange?" Then Akinosuke told his dream, that dream of 3 and 20 years sojourn in the realm of Tokuyo, in the island of Reishu, and they were astonished, because he had really slept for no more than a few minutes. One Goshi said, "Indeed, you saw strange things. We also saw something strange while you were napping. A little yellow butterfly was fluttering over your face for a moment or two, and we watched it. Then it alighted on the ground beside you, close to the tree, and almost as soon as it alighted there, a big ant came out of a hole and seized it and pulled it down into the hole. Just before you woke up, we saw that very butterfly come out of the hole again, and flutter over your face as before. And then it suddenly disappeared. We do not know where it went. Perhaps it was Akinosuke soul," the other Goshi said. "Certainly I thought I saw it fly into his mouth. But, even if that butterfly was Akinosuke soul, the fact would not explain his dream." "The ants might explain it," returned the first speaker. "Ants are queer beings, possibly goblins. Anyhow, there is a big ant's nest under that cedar tree." "Let us look," cried Akinosuke, greatly moved by this suggestion. And he went for a spade. The ground about and beneath the cedar tree proved to have been excavated, in a most surprising way, by a prodigious colony of ants. The ants had furthermore built inside their excavations, and their tiny constructions of straw, clay, and stems bore an odd resemblance to miniature towns. In the middle of a structure considerably larger than the rest there was a marvelous swarming of small ants around the body of one very big ant, which had yellowish wings and a long black head. "Why, there is the king of my dream!" cried Akinosuke, "and there is the palace of Tokuyo. How extraordinary! Reishu ought to lie somewhere southwest of it, to the left of that big root. Yes! Here it is. How very strange! Now I am sure that I can find the mountain of Hanryoko, and the grave of the princess." In the wreck of the nest he searched, and at last discovered a tiny mound, on the top of which was fixed a water-worn pebble, in shape resembling a Buddhist monument. Underneath it he found, embedded in clay, the dead body of a female ant. Mujina, by Lafcadio Hearn. On the Akasaka Road, in Tokyo, there is a slope called Chi-no-Kunyu-Zaka, which means the slope of the province of Ki. I do not know why it is called the slope of the province of Ki. On one side of this slope you see an ancient moat, deep and very wide, with high green banks rising up to some place of gardens, and on the other side of the road extend the long and lofty walls of an imperial palace. Before the era of street lamps and jinrikishas, this neighborhood was very lonesome after dark, and belated pedestrians would go miles out of their way rather than mount the Chi-no-Kunyu-Zaka, alone, after sunset. All because of a Mujina that used to walk there. The last man who saw the Mujina was an old merchant of the Kyobashi quarter, who died about 30 years ago. This is the story as he told it. One night, at a late hour, he was hurrying up the Chi-no-Kunyu-Zaka, when he perceived a woman crouching by the moat, all alone and weeping bitterly. Fearing that she intended to drown herself, he stopped to offer her any assistance or consolation in his power. She appeared to be a slight and graceful person, handsomely dressed, and her hair was arranged like that of a young girl of good family. "Oh Jochu," he exclaimed, approaching her. "Oh Jochu, do not cry like that. Tell me what the trouble is, and if there be any way to help you, I shall be glad to help you." He really meant what he said, for he was a very kind man, but she continued to weep, hiding her face from him with one of her long sleeves. "Oh Jochu," he said again, as gently as he could, please listen to me. This is no place for a young lady at night. Do not cry, I implore you. Only tell me how I may be of some help to you." Slowly she rose up, but turned her back to him, and continued to moan and sob behind her sleeve. He laid his hand lightly upon her shoulder, and pleaded, "Oh Jochu! Oh Jochu! Oh Jochu! Listen to me, just for one little moment. Oh Jochu! Oh Jochu!" Then that Oh Jochu turned around, and dropped her sleeve, and stroked her face with her hand, and the man saw that she had no eyes or nose or mouth, and he screamed and ran away. Up Chi-no-Kunyu-Zaka he ran, and all was black and empty before him. On and on he ran, never daring to look back, and at last he saw a lantern, so far away that it looked like the gleam of a firefly, and he made for it. It proved to be only the lantern of an itinerant soba seller, who had set down his stand by the roadside. but any light and any human companionship was good after that experience, and he flung himself down at the feet of the soba seller, crying out, "Ah! Kore! Kore!" roughly exclaimed the soba man. "Here! What is the matter with you? Anybody hurt you?" "No, nobody hurt me," panted the other, "only." "Ah! Only scared you?" queried the peddler, unsympathetically. "Robbers?" Not robbers, not robbers," gasped the terrified man. I saw a woman by the moat, and she showed me." "Ah! I cannot tell you what she showed me." Was it anything like this that she showed you?" cried the soba man, stroking his own face, which therewith became like unto an egg. And, simultaneously, the light went out.